Hello and welcome to Circle Time, the Early Years podcast with me, Glenn Denny. And I'm delighted to have podcast host, early years TV host, and above and beyond a nutritional therapist through and through. I've got the lovely Louise Mercieca with me. Louise, hello and welcome.
Hi, Glenn. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, delight, absolute delight. So we were we've kind of been emailing back and forth, literally in probably about the last 24 hours. And we were kind of like talking about subjects. And at first I thought, well, let's go down the usual fussy eating route. But actually you came up with something that's a lot more, well, a lot less talked about really, but a lot more to it. And that's the sort of the food landscape that children are exposed to. Do you want to tell us a bit more about what that means?
Yes, of course. There are many facets to the food landscape, but one thing that I think we always need to talk about when we talk about children nutrition is we are not comparing a like for like food landscape with any other generation that's gone before them. So when people say to me, oh, it never did me any harm, I always used to have that, we always used to do this,
Mhm.
there is no comparison because our food landscape has changed, particularly the last 20 years. It's been changing significantly for 40 years. And we do have a trickle down of the health consequences of that, which I'll come on to more in a moment.
Mhm.
But the last 20 years have been the most drastic in terms of the significant changes. And what I mean by changes are food is always food, of course. We're not now eating something completely different, but certain brands, certain products that you've had that have been around for years, their ingredients and their product specification will have changed. And so there's now more ingredients in our products that we're not used to. So, for
Mhm.
example, the sugar tax had an impact on sugar, but what it didn't sort of stop was the fact that they put more artificial sweeteners and things into products to get that taste trying to be the same. And it's not the
Yeah.
same. I don't know if people can kind of taste the difference of certain things, and it's got a strange synthetic flavor now. I personally would rather we still had the sugar, because we can metabolize sugar, we know what it is, and we know that we
Yeah.
should be limiting our consumption. Everyone knows we should limit consumption of sugar. What's changed in our food landscape is all the hidden things that we don't really know what they are. We didn't know that they'd come in. We don't really, if we turn the product over and look at the ingredient label, there'll be things like emulsifiers, stabilizers, e-numbers,
Mhm.
but they don't have to call them e-numbers. They can put them by their product name. So whereas people might be quite scared of an e-number, they might not recognize the name of that.
Oh.
So as long as it's labeled, it doesn't have to have the fact it's an e-number.
Wow. Okay. You probably see the look on my face going, what?
Horror.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, absolute horror. It's like you say, like, I mean, it's not good that there was sugar and stuff, but like you say, at least it was a natural-ish product that we can digest as humans. But
Mhm.
now it's like, what are we digesting?
Exactly. And it's not that these foods are not tested in laboratories, and that each individual ingredient, of course, goes through rigorous
Mhm.
protocols before it's allowed to go into the food chain. But each country have different regulations. We have lots of ingredients in our food that are banned in other countries, and America has lots of ingredients in their food that we would
Yeah.
not have in ours. And so it depends on the scientific, people who are making the, is it safe, is it not safe, and the
Yeah.
criteria that they use and the studies that they use are never done on humans, and they're rarely done with additives in conjunction with other additives. So in a food product you will have a combination of ingredients. In a scientific study, you're likely to have a thing tested in isolation. So it's my concern with our current food landscape is not that to scare everyone into thinking, good God, I can't eat anything, but just to be mindful that we're
Mhm.
not comparing like for like, that our products have changed, and that we need to be not distrustful, because that makes me sound really cynical, but we need to be mindful of our foods and not just think, oh, it's so and so brand, they've been around for hundreds of years, they're fine. No, their products have changed. They're probably not even the same company. They're probably owned
No.
now by an umbrella company.
Yes.
So, we're not just to trust our food. We need to make the change ourselves, because as we've seen through the summer, lots of things with our government, some of which, before lots of particular chaotic things started to happen. There was lots of really good health initiatives that were nearly set to come into place. We had a junk food advertising ban on, like the Transport for London had done, but much more wider. So we wouldn't have that. We had the buy one, get one free offers. They were not going to be allowed in big supermarkets on junk food. And we had 300 million funding for obesity support groups. U-turn, 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 nothing now.
There was an awful lot of U-turns,
An awful lot of U-turns, and unfortunately, I don't think they're going to U-turn on their U-turns. So there was some really good, well thought out plans, all set to go, all gone through process of this is going to put the UK in a really good position for proactive health, which is something we never normally do. It's reactive,
we're reactive. Yeah, I was going to say it's all reactive.
And unfortunately, that's all gone again. They've U-turned on all of that. So we're back to square one. So for people who think, well, we just need to wait for the food industry's fault. If their products are still there, then it's not going to happen. It's not going to change. No. We need to be the change to have any impact on our health. Because I'm sorry, I'm ranting. I get
no. It's people that with passion like that actually get the message out there. And if we didn't have that, then we wouldn't know what's going on. I mean, there is a lot, because if you think about it, like busy parents, like there's a lot of early years practitioners who are parents as well, lots and lots of us, and it's that case where we are in a hurry with the children, and you know what, it's like you say, it's a trusted brand that you go for, and like, yeah, I'm just going to reach for that, there we go, that will do, that will, something on the go, because we're leading such busy lives. But actually, like, even in terms of our practice, we should be slowing it down, and we should do the same with food, really, shouldn't we? Slow it down, look at what we're doing and what we're eating.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is hard. And I know it's hard because we all have busy lives. And at the moment, with the food prices and the cost of living crisis and the energy crisis, it's as long as you can feed somebody something, and that is, for some people, that is the only decision that can be made. I know it's probably not the healthiest, but it's there, and it's food. So it's not me being all, holier than now about these things. It's just that as society, we need to be much more mindful and distrusting of foods, and question things more, because we will pay the price with our health. And the thing with food at the moment, we have 4 groups of processed foods. There's always been processed food. If we think butter and olive oil are processed food, so when people talk about processed foods being really bad for us, that's not exactly true. We've always had food processing. A tin of tomatoes is a processed food, so that's not the problem. But particularly in the last 20 years, we've got 4 groups of the group 1, group 2, group 3, and group 4. In the last 20 years, we've seen the biggest rise in group 4, which under the NOVA classifications of food groups is the ultra processed foods. These are the ones we need to worry about. The rest of them, fine. Tinned fruit, tinned veg, frozen stuff, all processed, not a problem. We've been having them as humans for a very, very, very long time. We have not had the scale of health problems that we now have. So the scale of health problems, the link with processed food, the scale of this ingredient change is all linked to one group of food, that is group 4, that is the ultra processed foods. Problem is, they are the cheapest, the most convenient, the most available, where all the offers are, which is why I was so annoyed about that U-turn not happening, because the argument from the government was, we can't possibly take away offers in a cost of living crisis. No, you absolutely can on them, and put the offers on the foods that people should be eating, because what we're doing with those offers is taking away people's freedom of choice for healthy food. They literally can't afford healthy food.
Yeah, you're right. So again, there's that bit where you were using the word processed food, and yeah, you're right. So I have a tin of beans or a tin of tomatoes, that's processed food, but that's kind of like, for want of a better expression, safe processed food. But it's the ultra processed stuff that, like, whatever it is. But I think sometimes as well, do you think we get lost under the term processed food, and parents just think that anything that's processed, that's bad, and we should just be eating straight from the fields, kind of that sort of thing? Do you think that kind of confuses people?
If people could do that, but that's
It would.
not really very likely, is it? But
It
yes, I
would be
think
good.
people do get confused with processed foods.
Definitely. But it's that bit that, like you're saying as well, like these buy one get one free and whatever the multi-pack offers and things like that, they are targeted on the wrong things. Whereas why haven't we got, I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, buy one banana, get one banana free. Why can't we have offers like that? Why can't we do that on fruit and veg? I know some supermarkets do their pick of the five or whatever every week. But is it the ones that we all need, or is it just the ones that are just trying to get shot of?
I know it's a really good point, and unfortunately, the straightforward answer is that it's money, it's profit, it's
Yeah.
where the money is. The products that we don't need, the buy one get one frees that we don't need, they do make a big profit. So unfortunately,
Hmm.
whilst the manufacturers themselves, of course, know that they are not promoting health in society with these foods, and of course the government knows when they said, oh, we can't possibly take that off in a cost of living crisis, that these foods are not offering a nutritionally balanced diet for anybody. And it's so short-sighted because the impact of these ultra processed foods is catastrophic for health, and I don't use that term lightly.
No.
And the reason why I wanted to talk about it was because we are now having a generation being almost weaned on these foods because
Hmm.
through no choice, no fault of their own, people refer to lifestyle choices. There's no such thing for some people as lifestyle choices. There's lifestyle factors, and their choice is taken away from them because they go into a shop. If they have a shop near them, they may just have a very small shop. If you're in a very urban area and you live on a street, it may just be something very small, like one of the mini supermarkets, which are always more expensive as well.
Hmm.
And they will literally only be able to afford what they can afford, and that is not going to be anything nutritious because that is, we know, on average 3 times more expensive.
Yeah.
So the health and wealth divide is getting to a point, and it will be at a point in 10 years if we carry on, that you can only be healthy if you can afford to be healthy.
I mean, it's going to sound completely obvious, but it's just wrong.
In the sixth
Why should?
country.
Yeah, it's just bonkers that all this ultra processed food is so cheap, but yet anything that's actually good for us is costing more. You know,
Mhm.
it, but what sort, we're talking about long-term effects and like it's starting early on in life. What
Mhm.
kind of effects could it have?
Well, we'll look at so a couple. So if we look at a developing child who's really young, so especially in the 0 to 3, 0 to 5 window, where their brain is still, going through that really rapid pace of growth and development that the earliest brain goes through. It's phenomenal, the pace of growth that brain has. But the nutrition required by the brain at that time is quite specific. It's to do with the essential fatty acids, which we get from our diet, which we get
Hmm.
from foods. They are essential for a reason, and they build up 40% of our brain. Now, if you consider a child's brain has got a lot of growth to go to get to be the size of
Yeah.
an adult brain, that pace of development and the nutrition in those really early years, 0 to 3 in particular, but 0 to 5 is influential, is really important. If that 50% of the child's energy, because 50% of the calories in that age group goes up to their brain, with grown-ups it's only 20%, our brains only need 20% of our energy. If 50% of that dietary energy going up to the brain is not the energy that is required by the brain, so there's not the essential fatty acids, it's a combination of, for example, with ultra processed foods, the fats in those foods are considered to be trans fats or
Hmm.
artificially manufactured fats. There
Yeah.
is no omega-3, there is no AA or EGLA or DHL, none of the fats that we need to
Yeah.
build that 40% of the brain. And so that's quite crucial, because in that pace of growth of the brain is when a lot of the brain connections start to establish and
Hmm.
take place, which brings us on to the other problem with ultra processed foods, in that the way they are designed to be a heady mix of salt, sugar, and fat that does not exist in nature. So you
Hmm.
will not get any natural food lighting up your taste sensation in the same way that an ultra processed food does.
Yeah.
You'll know yourself if you've ever been someone who likes that type of food. And if people listening are like, really like a certain burger or something like that, and they see an advert for it and they're not even hungry, could be
No.
not even thinking about food. And this is one of the reasons why we were trying to ban the adverts, because as soon as you see that advert, those brain connections that are established through the pathways that link food to emotions and food to situations kick in. Suddenly you're drooling and you're hungry, and you weren't hungry. There's no biological hunger going on, but those pathways are connected. And the reason why they're connected is because that heady mix of salt, sugar and fat specifically designed by very clever people who know all to do with the brain, the same way that nutrition people do, these food manufacturers do. They know that that combination will activate the pleasure and reward center of the brain. They know that it will activate the dopamine response, which makes us feel happy and satisfied that we've had something. But it's also the center linked with addiction. And these foods are designed so that we don't even have to chew them. They are specifically designed to be a consistency that doesn't require much chewing. If you consider when you normally chew food, you produce saliva. That helps to produce a hormone called leptin, which tells us that we are full. These foods deliberately suppress that to enable us to eat more quickly, so that we can eat more, so that we don't produce the hormone that tells us that we are full, so that we are activating the pleasure and reward center of our brain. We're getting the dopamine response, but it's never enough the second time, because with dopamine, this is why it's the addiction center, which is why when we do brain scans and look at junk food versus drugs, it's the same response. Next time you eat it, you need more to get the same hit of dopamine, which is where the unhealthy habits and patterns and addictive behaviors start to come. If that happens in a very young developing brain, those pathways are set in stone almost for life. So that child is constantly going to battle with wanting those foods, craving those foods, biologically having a response to those foods, even when they're older and know they're not healthy.
So is that kind of like, I'm obviously trying to process myself, but is that where we're now starting to see more in terms of childhood obesity and eating disorders? Is this really where it's kind of stemming from initially, that really we're raising a group of children to become addicts to this food?
Yeah, there's many facets to it. I mean, obesity is a very complicated issue, and that's another conversation for another day, because it's often misrepresented, and in the media in particular, misrepresented to make people feel guilty and blame. And when that's parents with children, the barriers go up, the shutters go up. It's a defensive mechanism. They feel like they're being blamed, and at the moment, the way obesity in children is managed is horrific. So, which will only mean the situation will get worse, because the emotional links with obesity and eating, which is, as you say, partly down to those pathways being connected. So a lot of grown-ups now in their 30s and 40s who have had this food landscape for quite a bit of their lifetime now are quite heavy emotional eaters, stress eaters, comfort eaters, call it what you will, but their response to a situation is junk food.
I'm one of them.
That will happen with children.
Yeah, I can completely relate, because that's what I do. And I know, I think luckily I'm one of these people that I exercise as well. Yeah, I mean, as you know from one of our emails yesterday, I didn't reply for a while because I was out for a run. But yeah, I mean, I can completely relate to it. It's like, it becomes a comfort blanket that because of the chemicals it's releasing in the brain, you're just like, yeah, I'm just going to have this donut and everything will be fine.
But the issue is it isn't, because food cannot solve an emotional issue. And so it will make you feel better perhaps for a moment with the dopamine response, but with that comes the blood sugar crash, and with that comes the mood crash. So the blood sugar roller coaster is actually really bad for our mental health. And children are expected in a classroom to sit still, to concentrate, to focus, to remember things. And even in an early years setting, there's times in certain age groups where they're expected to do certain things. And if children are biologically on a blood sugar roller coaster, coupled with potentially a lack of essential fatty acids in the brain, one of which is crucial for frontal lobe, so problems solving, attention, all those things that children are having to do all the time. then they're going to be all over, their emotions are going to be all over the place. And unfortunately, when we get to school time and school age children, if you're looking like you're, you know, not very emotionally regulated, then often you'll get put down a behavioral path. And it's so wrong, and it makes me so sad to see how many children are, you know, in behavioral this, that, or the other. And I just think, has anybody asked them if they've had anything to eat, if they're actually hungry, or if they've, you know, what kind of food? Just in conversation, what do you have for
It's
breakfast?
funny
What do
you
you have for
say
dinner
that. I
last night?
mean,
And
I've
get a
noticed.
picture.
Yeah, I've noticed, like, it's funny you say that, because I mean, I work with 2-year-olds. That's the age group I normally work with, and I've noticed that some of our children, they get so emotional, so angry about something. And yes, I mean, 2-year-olds are designed to be full of emotion and just all sorts going on. But it's funny that we just think, hang on, do you need something to eat? And you give them, say, a breadstick or an oat cake or something, and that's it. They're okay for a bit. The emotion subsides and they're able to carry on.
Yeah, but in school that wouldn't happen.
No.
And so it's a different conversation the older children get. But there are many ways that kind of these ultra processed foods manifest in mental health, and we spoke about that emotional food connection, and that is really deep rooted. I think people should never underestimate the power of us grown-ups and how we talk about food with children. If we get really excited about a piece of cake and let's have a treat, let's have some cake, that's going to build up the excitement in the child who has no
Yeah.
concept that cake should be exciting. So we need to be mindful ourselves of that. And please, none of this, you know, eat your broccoli, you can have some chocolate, or let's,
Oh, yes.
you know, kind of language sets children up to have a really unhealthy relationship with food. And it's not me being really dramatic when I say that. It really does put weird food connotations in place, that, you know, chocolate is a treat and broccoli has to be overcome to get to the chocolate. We need to be
Yeah.
telling children what impact food has on their body.
It's almost like, I've read some research from Loughborough University kind of on that same sort of subject, that, you must eat your broccoli and then you can get some chocolate. And it was that kind of almost kind of giving it a negative connotation, that broccoli, it's like, yeah, it's revolting, but you've got to
It's the
eat
bad
it. You
guy.
must
Yeah.
eat it. And it's not. I love broccoli. I love
Likewise.
it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of demonizing that poor vegetable in order that the really lovely, yummy chocolates can be eaten. It's
Absolutely.
like, no,
Absolutely.
celebrate it.
Exactly. Celebrate the broccoli. I'm all with you on that, absolutely. But broccoli is always the example as well. It's always poor broccoli. But the way that we talk about food, the way that we present food, some grown-ups, if they don't like a vegetable, will be apologetic almost when they're serving it to the child. And if that's the first time the child is seeing it, they will pick up on those nuances from the grown-up. So we
Yeah.
do have to, it's a really responsible job to feed children, not just
Mm-hmm.
the physical food on the plate, but the whole food relationship, how we present it, how we talk about it, how our mannerisms are about it. We do not reward with food, we don't comfort with food, we don't bribe with food. All of them start children off with an emotional eating relationship that is really hard. If you're an emotional eating adult, really hard to break, really hard to break.
Really is. No, it's just like, I mean, this is such an in-depth subject. And I think, like, you've written a kind of a course around this, haven't you, that people can kind of
Yeah,
access?
I've literally just launched. So my book that I wrote back in 2018, when my little boy was 4 and he was just about to start school because he's an August baby. So it's always been like, oh, he's tiny going to school. You know, he was just 4, about 3 days before starting school. So I was like, I need to learn about, this. So I did a course on nutrition for children's brain development. It blew my mind. It scared the life out of me. And I decided to sit down and write a book because I thought people don't know this. But that was 4 years ago and it was bad enough then. It is much, much, much worse now. We've obviously had the pandemic, which has had a massive detrimental impact, as we know, on the younger ones' development in terms of speech and that interaction with peers and those sorts of things. Obesity and mental health have just skyrocketed with children. I was in a webinar. I like to name drop with this one. So I was in a webinar with Professor Chris Whitty, and he said that kind of, he was just the speaker, you know, didn't know who I was, but you know, that's not the point. I can say I was in a webinar with him.
Absolutely.
And his slide said COVID, the 2 years of COVID, the main 2 years, seen a massive spike, the biggest ever spike in childhood obesity that we've ever had on record. So, and that's not just there, that won't just go away. But those children who went up in figures in that point, and yes, I have my, you know, ums and ahs about the childhood measurement system, but it will still have gone up. Whether or not those figures are entirely accurate, I would always disagree. The childhood weight isn't accurate, but we know that it's definitely had an impact on childhood obesity in a big way, and that won't just go away. Once a child is obese, it's very hard for them not to be, because the way that it's handled is so bad. We cannot put children on a diet. We should never mention a diet word to children. We should never single children out. We should never overly make them exercise, because then we have adults who are terrified of exercise because of the stigma associated with it. So many connotations with having an obese child. It is such a delicate period of time if you have got an overweight or obese child, to get the balance right. Otherwise, 80% of obese children will be obese adults. And epigenetically, a subject for another day, because that is fascinating. If you are, then you are likely to also have obese children and obese grandchildren. So the epigenetic influence goes 2 or 3 generations, which is mind-blowing and fascinating.
Yeah,
Definitely
really
a subject for another day, because it's
definitely. I know. I think you're gonna have to come back as a guest again, you know. Yeah, I think as well, like we keep saying the word obese, and actually it's one of those things. Now, I was overweight for a while, and I tracked my weight using the BMI, you know, the body mass index scale. And for a while, it said I was obese. And you know, you look at it and you just feel awful about yourself. You don't feel good. You feel fat. You feel frumpy, and then you're comforty. And I think as well, it's almost like we need to change that word, or make it I don't know. It's just I
it's a
just think it's an
horrible word,
awful word.
the connotations of the word, as you say. I used to see individual clients. I stopped that about 4 years ago, and it was nearly always weight related. But as a nutritional therapist, it would always be the therapy rather than the meal plan, because you cannot start to work with somebody and just, oh, they'd be like, oh, well, okay, what have I got to eat? Because that's what they've been told. They've been put on this plan and that plan and this plan and that plan for decades potentially, but nobody had ever asked them, well, how do you feel about food? How does it make you feel? In what situations would you want to go for this food? Nobody had ever spoken to them about that food relationship. And until you can deal with that food relationship, which is why if we start with children and we get our terminology right with children, we're setting them up on a better path initially. They are going to be fighting and navigating through an increasingly difficult food landscape, one that is designed for convenience, not health, and they are going to be growing up in an increasingly obesogenic environment. Our environment makes it much easier to be obese than to be thin, much easier. So you're battling all the time, and the way the media present it, as you say, you see that and you think, oh well, I might as well just have this because I'm already there. And you know, it's you know, you don't want to go out, so you don't want to go for a walk or go to the gym because you feel too horrible to go and be seen. So you internalize, and that probably leads to more eating. And a lot of that is the way it's been presented in the media, to almost be, well, they should eat better, they should make better choices. And it's like, well, that's not helpful.
No, it is that bit. It's like, I mean, do you think as well, like early years settings have got quite a key role to play in sort of starting off our younger, you know, our younger citizens on a good path, but also supporting the parents at the same time?
It is much easier to support the youngsters than the parents, I would say. But yes, if you are in early years, you have the most important job ever, I think. And I think as a sector, it's not recognized enough. And, you know, and all the other things that come with that. It is the most important job. And it is the most influential window of that child's development. So if you are feeding them in that time, you are their mate. They see you more than their parents, probably, you know, so that you are their main source of wisdom on all things to do with, you know, with their food. And so it's an incredibly influential role and it's incredibly important, but I don't feel that EYFS covers nutrition anywhere near enough. It
No.
certainly doesn't go into the depth that I would like to see it go into. Eat well plate means nothing to me. It's nothing. Portion sizes and that, yes, very important. But what's more important is everything that goes underneath the food. So the food relationship, the food language, the science of food. You mentioned my course and I got sidetracked as I often do. So when I wrote my book, it was called How Food Shapes Your Child. My courses is taking that into a series of courses. So it's the How Food Shapes Your Child series. The one I just launched is Building a Brain. So it's all about the early development and the role of ultra processed food on brain development and the role that the foods we should be having to healthily build a brain. And then it goes into the muscular system and skeleton. All of these are windows of opportunity in childhood that's so influential nutritionally. Well, it's not covered enough. And then the last one is shaping food relationships. And this is where your role is so important. Those early neural pathways linked with food can be really positive. We can have positive food cravings for healthy food. We can have emotional attachments to healthy food. We can have positive memories of something really lovely and healthy. It doesn't always have to be unhealthy food. Natural food can give us a dopamine response, but the food industry have made it much easier and quicker and more convenient to get it artificially.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Well, what I'll do is, for the benefit of our listeners, I will share the link so that they can go on and discover more about your course. But Louise, I just want to say a massive thank you for coming onto the podcast. It's been absolutely eye-opening, is probably not covering it enough, but it honestly, my head's thinking a lot now. So that's good. It's what it's about. It's to challenge our thinking about things. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having me. That is definitely the challenge, to just think twice about food. I think that's it. Always put a step change in. What is this food doing? I used to say to my clients, like, I will go, I know I can talk, but I always used to say to my clients, when I had clients, I would say, just look at your piece of food or whatever it is, wherever you are, forget everyone else. Are you worthy of my body? And to ask the food that before you eat it.
That's a really good way of looking at it. Louise Mercieca, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you want to take part in the podcast, you can visit our website, circletimepodcast.co.uk, or email us. It's postoffice@circletimepodcast.co.uk. From me, Glenn Denny, until the next time, thanks for listening.